Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome back to the Flint Community Webinar, your community resource every Friday at noon. We've got a really great lineup for you today. And I also want to acknowledge that this weekend is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all of the dads out there, to my husband and my dad. Happy Father's Day. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how people are sleeping, and we're going to get into some of the ins and outs of how we get good sleep. We're also going to talk a little bit about vector-borne diseases. When we think about vector-borne diseases, we're talking about ticks, Lyme disease, and mosquitoes. And we've got really great people to help us think about some of that. So Nurse T is back with us, Dr. G is back with us, and we've got Danielle Lederer, who's Chief Epidemiologist with Genesee County Health Department, and Dr. Robin Tucker, who has expertise in sleep and is going to talk to us a little bit about sleep. So we're going to start out with Danielle. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm going to share my screen right now. So my name is Danielle Lederer, and I'm the Chief Epidemiologist at the Genesee County Health Department. I just first wanted to say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and also my father and my husband, who are great fathers, the best. So Happy Father's Day. Today, we're going to talk about vector-borne diseases, ticks, Lyme disease, and mosquitoes. We're going to discuss why they're important, how to prevent them, and what we can do moving forward. So ticks are extremely hardy, nasty little buggers, and I'm excited to talk about them today. I passionately hate them, so I want to make sure that people are aware of the risk that comes with increasing tick populations and how we can prevent diseases associated with ticks. So, talking about ticks, ticks are little survivors. They're very hardy, they're hard to kill, they tolerate cold, and they can go months without a meal. So they survive all winter long, and we expect activity to be very high in 2023. I'm sure some of you have already noticed increased tick populations in your communities where you normally don't see ticks. So ticks, there's 20 known species that reside in Michigan. There are several kinds that exist that bite people and pets, but there's only a few that carry dangerous diseases in bacteria and viruses or parasites. So we'll talk about those more common ones. Not all tick bites make you sick, but tick-borne disease does occur in Michigan, and it can be serious or fatal if not properly treated. And so we're going to talk a little about how you can treat that, what you should do if you do get a tick bite in the following slides. But I did just want to talk about ticks in their natural environment first and what happens with ticks. So ticks are mostly found in tall grasses, wooded areas, or fields near wooded areas. Although we started to see their habitat slightly change, and they're kind of moving into areas that don't involve some of these more woodsy areas. They're even in communities that are neighborhoods, suburbs, things like that, because what we see is deer population moving them in. Ticks do not normally come indoors to your home, but they can be carried inside on people or on pets. Ticks like to live ticks like to hook on to humans and in pets in areas that are not often seen. So places like your hair, your groin area, your chest, underneath your fingernails or on your elbows, like in between your elbows. So places that like nooks and crannies. And so that's why we always tell people, check all your little bits and pieces when you're looking for ticks, because they like to hang out in areas that are kind of unseen. There's 3 life stages of ticks, and that's the larvae stage, the nymph, and the adult. And what I like to say is that nymph stage is the most dangerous stage because that's the hardest to see. I'll show you on the next slide, but before I move on there, I'd like to show you, there's a little finger at the bottom of this slide, and you'll see, moving from left to right, different stages of ticks and different types of ticks. So there's the 3 most common ticks here on this page: the American dog tick, the Lone Star tick, and the black-legged tick. And the nymph stage is all the way to the right. So you'll see that tiny little dot. That's the one that's a nymph stage. That's kind of the one that we consider the most dangerous because it's the hardest to see. And then that really kind of larger one, that's a tick that's already sucked on some blood of either a human or a dog. The most common ticks are the American dog tick, which make up 70% of the Michigan types of ticks. So we'll talk about that in a few slides as well. But as you can see here, ticks can be as small as a poppy seed. Here's a muffin, a lemon poppy seed muffin, and there's 5 ticks on this muffin. And so as you can see, you probably can't tell what is a poppy seed and what is actually a tick. And that is that nymph stage where it's difficult to identify, and the tick has an easier time being misseen by a human if they're in that lymph stage. So they can stay on a human and has a potential to create more disease because the tick can stay on there longer. So I actually have a actual size comparison to the right of the muffin graphic, and you'll see that black-legged ticks are much smaller than even 1 inch. You can see I have a 1 to 2 inches here, and you can see the different dog ticks, American dog tick, black-legged tick, and Lone Star tick, and how big they are. So very, very small, very easily to escape the eye. Ticks and vector-borne disease is what we're here to talk about today. And like I said, we have the 3 most common ticks here, the American dog tick, the black-legged tick, and the Lone Star tick. Each of these has the potential to cause different types of disease. So not every tick is infected with disease. That's important to know. But these are the ticks and the diseases typically associated with the ticks if they are infected with a disease. So American dog ticks make up 70% of the ticks found in Michigan, and they're associated with Rocky Mountain spotted fever and tularemia. The black-legged tick is associated with Lyme disease, which is what we'll talk about most today, and anaplasmosis, babesiosis, and some other diseases. And then we have the Lone Star tick, which make up only 5% of the ticks found in Michigan, and cause ehrlichiosis and tularemia if they're infected with them. So Lyme disease is caused by the bacterium Borrelia burgdorferi, and in most cases, the tick must be attached to a human for 36 to 48 hours or more before the Lyme disease can be transmitted. So the important fact to note is a tick has to be infected with the Lyme disease, and then the tick has to attach to a human to actually cause Lyme disease. So if you take that tick off within 24 hours, you're less likely to be infected with Lyme disease. So it's really important to note, if you find a tick on you, to take that tick off of you within 24 hours to most likely prevent or reduce your risk of Lyme disease. Lyme disease is the most common reported vector-borne disease in the US and Michigan, and it's transmitted by the black-legged tick. So that middle of the road most common tick. So second most common tick in Michigan, it's transmitted by that type of tick. And it's really important to note that the majority of cases can actually be treated successfully with antibiotics. So if you notice signs and symptoms of a tick-borne disease like Lyme disease, typically beginning 1 to 2 weeks after a tick bite, you should reach out to your medical provider, especially if you're experiencing things like fever, chills, rash, headache, fatigue, muscle or joint aches, those types of things. You're going to want to reach out to your physician, especially if you've found ticks on your body in most recent weeks before that. Many cases of Lyme disease don't actually have a target-shaped rash that we've come to think of when we think of Lyme disease. There sometimes may be no rash at all, but it's important to notice those symptoms, important to check yourself after being in woodsy areas or anytime you're really spending a lot of time outdoors, walking trails for ticks. And then if you notice a tick on you, take it off immediately and contact your healthcare provider if you do experience any symptoms. The reason why we're so passionately talking about Lyme disease today is because while cases in Michigan remain low compared to high incidence states like Maine, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, case counts are rising in Michigan. We've seen a 275% increase in confirmed Lyme disease cases in Michigan from 2018 to 2022. And that number is very similarly reflected in Genesee County as well. Deer are important hosts for ticks. So one of the reasons we're seeing this increase in ticks is because of the deer population over the last decade has been substantially increasing. So we're seeing that increase in deer population likely contributing to an increase in tick population. And as I mentioned before, these ticks are super hardy, hard to squash, can tolerate droughts. They love this warm weather that we're having and climate change, and they're really hard to kill. They can go months without a meal. So their populations just kind of keep increasing and increasing. And the most important thing to note is, while not all tick bites and not all ticks carry disease, it's important to avoid tick bites and promptly remove the ticks for the best way to prevent infection. Here's a map that just shows, and I just want to briefly show this. That very small map on the left is the Michigan risk map for Lyme disease in 2014. And the bigger map you see in the center is the one for 2023. And while I think it's a little bit misleading because Genesee County makes it seem like there's just a potential for risk, not a known risk for Lyme disease, we're seeing that spread very fast in 6-7 years of known Lyme disease risk move from the west side of Michigan and the northern part of Michigan to the east side of Michigan and down southeast Michigan. So you can see that that map is now almost completely some type of red or pink shade, which means there is a known risk for Lyme disease or there's the potential risk for Lyme disease. So now moving on to the more important thing, which is what can be done about these ticks and Lyme disease, right? So we know that ticks are hardy. We know they're increasing. We're going to have to live with them in our communities. So what can be done about it? Because there is things that can be done about it, and that is prevent tick bites by wearing clothing that covers your arms, legs, and feet when you're outdoors, wearing light colored clothing so you can spot ticks more easily, applying tick prevention and repellent, so containing DEET, things like DEET, picaridin, and oil of lemon eucalyptus. And most importantly, checking yourself and others for ticks regularly after spending time outdoors, checking your pets for ticks in areas behind their ears, behind their knees, their tails, and their underbelly, checking yourself for ticks anytime you're coming back from spending time outdoors. So places like your armpits, your hair, your chest, your groin, the back of your knees and your elbows, your clothes. And you want to inspect all these places behind your ears too. So for humans, your neck. It may look like a new freckle or a speck of dirt, especially since we talked about that they can be the size of a poppy seed. So make sure you're aware of these ticks, where they can hide, promptly remove them after to prevent being bitten. So, or you've already been bitten, and so you want to take them off with tweezers safely. And if you want to, there's a amazing feature called Tick Pics by MDHHS, and you can submit the tick that you find either on yourself or on your property, a picture of it, and you can send it via email, and they'll get back to you within 24-48 hours usually, and they'll identify the tick and let you know if it's one that could potentially carry Lyme disease or another type of tick-borne illness. And so that's a great feature. I've used it myself. They've been able to tell me, no worries, even though this tick was on your head, this is not one that's associated with disease. So that was a sigh of relief, and that's okay. And so I have the link there for that. And then I want to also mention to seek prompt medical care of illness if that occurs after exposure to ticks. So, because again, it can be treated by antibiotics. And lastly, we have 1 more minute. So I just want to mention that mosquito-borne viruses are also being identified, and that's typical for this time of year, just like with ticks. First detection of a mosquito-borne virus was detected already, and that was in Saginaw Valley. So Jamestown Canyon virus is the type of virus that was found in a mosquito already this year. Typically, most cases occur starting from late spring to mid-fall. So it's just that time of year. Residents can stay healthy by using simple, effective strategies to protect themselves. And I've listed some of those strategies here, many which are similar to preventing tick-borne illness, which is, applying insecticides like DEET, always following the manufacturer's directions for those, wearing light colored clothing, long pants, long sleeves, especially like towards those nighttime hours, and maintaining window and door screenings, as well as making sure you're not creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes around your home. Things like emptying water from buckets, kiddie pools, old tires, and containers where that mosquitoes can lay eggs. So that's all I have for today, and thank you for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Danielle. This is such really useful information, particularly given that we're going to the season where people are outside, right? And with COVID, we were inside, but we're outside now, and people are really looking forward to having their opportunity to be safe. So super appreciate all this really useful information. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are right on time, and I want to make sure we're thoughtful because I know Dr. Tucker has a lot of really great information to share with us, and she's going to be talking to us about sleep. And I hope in honor of Father's Day that our daddies are getting a little bit more sleep in. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about strategies that we need to think about to optimize our sleep.
Absolutely. Although I have to say, coming after the nightmare section and having to talk about good sleep, I don't know if I had known that, if I would have signed up for today.
Oh, no.
Well, I'll do my best.
Right? Yeah.
All right, let me get everything set up here and so I can see what I'm doing. All right. I think that will work. Hopefully you can see that. Okay, so today I'm going to hopefully share with you some tips and tricks that might help you get more and better sleep. That's the goal for today, without actually putting you to sleep from the content. I want to talk kind of quickly, so if there are questions, we can have time for those. But I just want to share with you, like, what is sleep? We all do it, but maybe we can have a definition that will sort of unite our understanding of sleep. We'll talk about why sleep is so important to your health, how much you should get, quality versus quantity. They are different and both important. How we fall asleep, potential causes of your sleep problems, and also some possible solutions for you to try out. So let's give a definition to this concept of sleep. And there are several definitions floating around out there, but the one that I kind of like is that sleep is a period of reduced responsiveness to really external stimuli. It's usually associated with immobility, and it's reversible. So let's break that down for just a moment. When you're asleep, you're not very attentive to your external environment unless something is really going to sort of interrupt your sleep. Maybe it's a very loud noise, but usually we can kind of sleep through, more common disruptions and noises and even light and things like that. So we're just not as aware of our external environment. Sleep is usually associated with immobility. There are certain sleep disorders where you are up or moving while you're sleeping. And as you can imagine, those can be very dangerous, at least potentially. So healthy sleep is associated with you staying in bed and minding yourself in bed. And then it's reversible. So unlike a coma where we, are sort of trapped in that state of consciousness, we can typically enter and exit the state of sleep, at will. We do know that sleep appears to be essential because all of the organisms that we've studied in terms of scientists that study sleep engage in some sort of sleep-like behavior. I've got pictures of dolphins, reptiles, ourselves. Even bacteria have periods of activity where they're more or less active. And so this is a behavior that is conserved across, just about anything we've studied. We don't really know the exact biological purpose for why we sleep, and we may never really understand that. But what we do know is while we're asleep, there are many physiological processes, bodily processes that occur. For example, if maybe you went to the gym and had a good workout, you've done some muscle damage, which is what we want if we want to grow larger muscles, more responsive muscles. That muscle repair is going to take place while you're asleep. Your brain, if you're interested in maintaining your memory, like I think most of us are, right? Whenever I forget something, I get a little bit of a panic, right? Is this the beginning of mental, memory issues? Well, one of the reasons that I really like to protect my sleep is because I know while I'm asleep, my brain is able to get rid of toxins that build up over the course of the day. That ability to flush out the bad stuff that's been associated with dementia and Alzheimer's is an important part of why we need to get enough sleep and good quality sleep. And these are just I'm just scratching the surface here on all of the things that are happening while we sleep. So sleep is so, so important to your health. If you're having trouble sleeping, you are not alone. About 35% or 1 in 3 Americans report that they don't meet recommended amounts of sleep. You can see in the figure here, the states that are darker in color have a higher prevalence of this. More people in Michigan are reporting that they're not getting enough sleep compared to other states in the country. In fact, we're usually about 47th or 48th out of the 50 states when it comes to people getting enough sleep. So if you're here because you have sleep issues or you know somebody that has sleep issues, you're in good company. Many of us struggle with sleep issues. Some of it's temporary, some of it's more chronic, but I think everybody has a night where they struggle to get to sleep. So I just showed you a picture of states where people are not getting enough sleep, but I didn't really tell you how much is enough. So I have this figure here for you to check out. What it's showing you is the amount of sleep need by age group. So I work with adults. So really, when we talk about adult sleep duration, we're looking at 7+ hours per night. So the range is like 7 to 9 hours a night. If you're younger, you need more sleep. So our sleep need decreases over the course of our lifespan. But if you have toddlers or preschoolers, even your school age and teens, they need more sleep than you do. So it's important that we protect their sleep time as well. We know that sleep patterns have changed over time. So back in the early 1900s, people were reporting that on average, they slept about 9 hours a night. Data on this slide is from 2003. I have some more recent data. It really hasn't changed. We've seen almost a 25% reduction in the amount of sleep that we get on average. And we can talk about why that might be the case, but I think that's kind of an alarming statistic and something that we should be aware of as we think about our sleep habits. So we've talked about sleep quantity or sleep duration, and we have public health messaging around that, right? Like you've probably heard, oh, I should be getting 8 hours of sleep. That seems to be kind of that magic number that everyone will remember. But what we don't talk about from a public health perspective is another component or another dimension of sleep health, and that is sleep quality. And we can kind of think about sleep quality as this idea of like how well you sleep. So I will tell you from a scientific point of view, there is really no agreed upon definition of quality. It's very subjective. And I think some proposed indicators of good sleep quality have been things like, when you're in bed, most of that time is spent sleeping. You can fall asleep quickly. You don't wake up very often. If you do wake up, you can fall back asleep quickly. But even if we kind of try to use these sort of markers of good sleep, when we ask people how well they slept, even if they meet all these things, sometimes they just say, you know what, I didn't really sleep that well last night. And we know that quality is different from quantity. They may be related sometimes, but I can sleep 8 hours a night and still wake up feeling unrefreshed, unrestored, and just kind of like, I just didn't sleep well last night. So quantity and quality, not the same thing. Sometimes they're related. Like if you have like a luxurious, long sleep and you wake up and you feel great, but they're not always the same. And I think that's important to remember that both insufficient sleep and poor sleep quality are associated with the 10 leading causes of death in the United States. And that's why, from a health perspective, I'm very interested in how you're sleeping, and I hope that you are as well. So we won't go through all of these, but I just want to point out chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease. These are associated with sleep problems. But we also have, if you see this dot here, this little entry here, infectious diseases are, your risk for developing those is higher if you're not sleeping well. Your immune system just doesn't function at top capacity when you're not sleeping well, when you have sleep problems. And interestingly, serious or death from COVID-19 was associated with poor sleep habits, poor sleep problem, or poor sleep issues. And so that's I guess a more recent, occurrence, but certainly reflects this idea that sleep is important for immune system health. And then finally, we have mental health concerns too. When you're not sleeping well, when you're not sleeping enough, your ability to make good decisions, to manage and kind of maintain your emotional stability, your mood, your risk of anxiety and depression, all of these things are associated with sleep problems. And so I think you can see that if you have sleep issues, these are going to be impacting many, many parts of your health, many parts of your life. And so it's important that you do your best to try to address sleep issues if you have them. And we'll talk about how to do that in just a second. So I want to share with you kind of how you fall asleep, because I think it will help you to understand some of the recommendations that I'm going to share with you in the next few slides. It is a little sciencey, so hopefully I'll kind of explain it the best that I can and it will make sense. But if you have any questions, be sure to let me know. So I'm going to try to walk you through this very weird picture that I have on my screen. And let me orient you to what's going on. So at the bottom, we have when we wake up, and then over the course of the day, and then we fall asleep, and then we sleep, and then we wake up again. And what I want to take you through is how we kind of transition from wake to sleep. To do that, to fall asleep, you need to have two systems in your body working together to help you fall asleep. The first one is called the homeostatic sleep drive system. You can also refer to this as sleep debt. So let me find my cursor again. So this sleep debt concept is in the purple line here. And when we first wake up, if we have gotten at least 7 hours and we've slept well, we're going to have very low sleep debt. Our drive to sleep will be low. Like, it'll be hard to fall asleep if you wanted to, okay? Over the course of the day, the longer that we are awake, the higher our sleep debt is. The drive to sleep becomes stronger until a point where it kind of reaches its maximum, and then it's not going to get any higher. It's just going to plateau. So that's important. You need to be kind of tired to be able to fall asleep, right? The other system that's going to be working with your sleep debt or your sleep drive system is your circadian rhythm of alertness. And that's in this white stripe here, okay? So you might just hear people talk about circadian rhythm and like there's only one. But what I will tell you is that there are many bodily systems that undergo a circadian rhythm. And all the word circadian means is it follows about a 24-hour pattern, like a daily pattern, okay? So this circadian rhythm that we want to talk about for sleep is alertness. So let's walk through this. What happens when you wake up? Well, most of us are not at our sharpest right out of bed, right? We need a little time to kind of ease into our day. Maybe that's through coffee, maybe you work out, maybe you read the paper, something to kind of just allow you to transition from being asleep to being awake. But as the day goes on, we all kind of experience increasing levels of alertness until we reach our peak. And then as the day goes on into the evening, that level of alertness starts to fade, starts to fall. So when we have low levels of alertness from our circadian rhythm and high levels of sleep debt, that's when you are most likely to fall asleep, okay? So what happens when these systems kind of are maybe not working at their optimal, or that we do things that interfere with them working optimally? Let's talk about naps, for example. If I take a nap, especially like a long nap, maybe I sleep for an hour and a half. If I do that maybe in the afternoon, what I'm going to do to my sleep debt is decrease it, right? I'm reducing some of my sleep debt, which is going to mean that I'm not going to reach peak sleep debt until later in the night. It's going to be hard for me to fall asleep probably when I want to, and my bedtime is going to be later than I would like it to be. In terms of circadian rhythm, sometimes you might have heard of people using a supplement called melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone that the brain makes naturally. And what melatonin's job is it helps to reduce levels of alertness. So if I take melatonin, what I'm hoping to have happen is this curve here where it's kind of nice and gentle. I want it to happen more quickly so I can get lower levels of alertness. It's a signal for my brain that it's time to go to sleep, and hopefully I can fall asleep a little bit earlier. Okay, so those are some of the, I think, concepts that will help you to understand some of the things that I'm going to share with you that can help you with getting more and better sleep in the next few slides. So if you have sleep issues, you probably want to think about what might be causing them. And for me, I can kind of lump them into or group them into 3 different categories of sleep problems: medical issues or physiological issues, environmental issues, and behavioral issues. So medical issues would be a disease or a condition that you really need to be working with your primary care provider or a specialist to manage. So for example, if you have obstructive sleep apnea, this is a condition where your airway collapses multiple times a night, even multiple times an hour. It reduces the amount of oxygen to your brain panics and wakes you up. And that is very, very disruptive to getting a good night's sleep. One of the hallmark symptoms of sleep apnea is if you look at your clock, you go to bed, you wake up, you've slept at least 7 hours, but you're very, very drowsy. Maybe you can't get through the day without a nap. This is something that I would tell you, go talk to your doctor about, because the suggestions that I'm going to make are not going to fix that, right? If you have, let's say, diabetes and you're struggling with high blood sugar, one of the ways that the body copes with that is to try to excrete it through urine. So you're going to have frequent trips to the bathroom. If those are happening at night, it's going to disrupt your sleep, make you feel groggy and unrefreshed in the morning, and reduce the amount of total sleep that you get. Work with your physician, your endocrinologist, to manage your blood sugar so that you don't have that issue. You may have a diagnosed sleep disorder. Many of these diagnosed sleep disorders are responsive to medication, and those can be addressed, again, by working closely with your physician. But there are other causes of sleep issues. There may be environmental issues where the conditions of your room, of your bedroom or your house are not conducive to getting good quality sleep or enough sleep. It may be too hot or too cold, too noisy, too bright. These are things that we hopefully have some control over and can try to fix. I'll give you some tips on that in just a second. And then there are behaviors that we engage in, or maybe that we avoid, that are going to cause problems with getting enough sleep. If you have an inconsistent sleep schedule, you're going to bed, one night at 10 and one night at 2 and all these sorts of things, that's going to make it difficult to get good quality, consistent sleep. Maybe you're consuming caffeine too close to bed. These are things that we're doing that are really kind of interfering with our sleep health. So I'm going to focus on the environmental and behavioral changes you can make to improve your sleep. But like I said, if you think there's a medical condition that's causing your problem, go talk to your primary care physician. They can certainly evaluate you and get you on your way to better health. That said, just because you have a medical problem causing your sleep problems doesn't mean that you aren't also suffering from environmental and behavioral issues that could also help improve your sleep problem. So hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to talk today about sleep hygiene. And really, if you're not familiar with this term, sleep hygiene refers to the behaviors that we do or that we avoid that will help us to protect our sleep. It's a lot like dental hygiene, right? To protect our oral health, we brush, we floss. Those are the behaviors that we do to protect our oral health. Sleep hygiene is just like that, but for sleep. So one of the tools that we use, actually, I helped to develop a program that's currently offered by MSU Extension. I'll talk about that at the end. It's free of charge. It's been shown to be effective in helping people get more and better sleep. And one of the tools that we use in the program is this tool called the Sleep Hygiene Index. And all the Sleep Hygiene Index is it's these 13 statements. And what you do is you read the statement, and then you ask yourself, how often do I engage in this behavior? Do I always do this? Do I frequently do this? Do I sometimes do this? Or do I rarely or never do this? And if you respond that you always or frequently engage in these behaviors, those are the ones that I would suggest you evaluate to see if changing them might be helpful to getting more and better sleep. So we're going to go through these kind of one at a time. So if you haven't read through this, or maybe the font is too small, we'll go through these together. And again, you're asking yourself, do I always or frequently do this? Because if so, that might be a behavior that you want to change. So let's talk about these. So I can give you the reasons why these are not good behaviors as we read them, okay? So I take daytime naps lasting 2 or more hours. I go to bed at different times from day to day. I get out of bed at different times, or I stay in bed longer than I should 2 or 3 times a week. And if you say you always or frequently engage in one or more of these behaviors, the reason why we would suggest that you avoid those things is because consistency is really, really helpful for your circadian rhythm. That's that system that's going to help you fall asleep at a certain time. And also, this can help with sleep debt. If you go to bed late and then sleep in really late the next day, you've just kind of moved your whole body clock a few hours maybe behind where you want it to be. So if you can keep the same bedtime and the same wake time day after day as consistently as possible, even on the weekends, you're going to have better luck, better sleep, more and better sleep. And that sounds super easy and maybe very common sense. But when we ask the people who take our sleep program, what's one of the, the most important or the most helpful tips that you learned through the program, they will say consistent bedtime and consistent wake time was one of the most important things that I learned. Now, we're not perfect. There will be nights when you want to stay up and do things for fun, or maybe you just can't help it. There's something that's scheduled late. That's okay. Go to bed as soon as you can, and then wake up at the same time, your normal wake up time. You might be a little tired that day, but by the time nighttime rolls around, it's going to be very easy for you to fall asleep at your usual time, rather than if you sleep in and push everything back a few hours. So consistency will help. Okay, so we did 4 for 1 there. That was pretty good. What about if you exercise to the point of sweating within an hour of going to bed? If you always or frequently do that, I would suggest that you move your exercise time, if you can, to earlier in the day. And it doesn't have to be at 4 a.m. or anything like that. But the reason why we would suggest that you try to avoid exercise at this, so close to bed, is because when you do that, you're going to raise your core body temperature. And one of the signals that your body uses to understand that it's time to lower my level of alertness, time to get ready for bed, is actually a decrease in your core body temperature. So when we exercise, we're sort of prolonging that decrease in core body temperature, because your core will decrease, but it's going to take a while, right? You've sort of basically pushed your bedtime back a little bit. One of the things that you can do as kind of a trick or maybe a hack is to kind of exploit this idea and give yourself a warm bath or shower about an hour before you think you're ready for bed. Now, this will also increase your core body temperature temporarily. Once you get out of the bath or shower, it's going to facilitate that decrease in core body temperature and hopefully tell your body, hey, this is one of the signals that it's time to go to sleep. So we've had people try this in our program. They seem to think that it's helpful. There's scientific literature on this. Give it a shot. See if you think that this is helpful. One of the other things too that I'll point out is just because your core body temperature is decreasing, that warm blood has to go somewhere. And so it goes to your hands and your feet. And I know that if my feet are cold, it is really, really difficult for me to get to sleep. So socks may be an option if, make sure that that's not going to contribute to circulation problems or anything like that. But trying a warm pair of socks, that may help to, again, get your body understanding that it's time for bed. Okay, so we'll move on. Maybe you use alcohol, tobacco, or caffeine within 4 hours of going to bed, or even after going to bed. If this is something that you always or frequently do, I would suggest modifying that behavior. Because what we know is that these compounds will either make it difficult to sleep, like caffeine, or some of us feel maybe a little drowsy after we have a drink. But while you might feel drowsy and think that helps you to fall asleep, alcohol actually interferes with your ability to get more deep and restorative sleep. So you'll wake up the next day, maybe not feeling your best. The other thing about alcohol is that you develop a tolerance to the drowsiness inducing effects relatively quickly. So now you have to drink more alcohol to get that effect. And we know that, that can kind of send us down a path that we don't want to go down. So think about, trying to get to sleep without these sorts of sleep aids. And I'll say one thing about caffeine. So this sleep hygiene index statement is caffeine within 4 hours of going to bed. But you should understand that some people break down caffeine really slowly, and other people break it down quite quickly. So if you're a slow person that has a slow caffeine metabolism, a slow ability to break down caffeine, it's going to be in your system and working for a longer period of time. And so it could be interfering with sleep way later than you actually think. So you may want to limit your caffeine to mornings only. We had a person in our program who usually did kind of a routine 3 p.m. Starbucks run and decided, well, what happens if I avoid that, if I stop doing that? And he reported that he felt like he could get to sleep faster at night when he avoided his Starbucks in the afternoon. So that might be something you want to experiment with and see if that helps you. All right, moving along here. I do something that may wake me up before bed, or I do important work before bedtime. Sometimes that's the only time we have during the day to get these things done. But what you should know is that when you engage in these behaviors that are stimulating, like get you excited, maybe you're playing games, you're doing something that you enjoy, or that is stressful, like paying bills or studying for an exam, things like this, that's going to elevate your heart rate, get you stressed out, get you excited, and make it really, really difficult to lower that level of alertness and prepare for bed. So if you can, again, protect that time right around bedtime, you do these things before bed, give yourself time to relax and unwind, and then hit the bed. I use my bed for things other than sleeping or sex. And this can really extend to the bedroom, right? So maybe you're watching television, you're reading, you're eating in bed. And what we know from kind of the sports performance literature, oddly enough, is that if you remove those activities from the bedroom and you're starting to associate the bedroom with relaxation, with calm, with pleasure, with good things, that is going to send that signal to your brain just that much faster that it's time to relax, that it's time to go to bed. So there have been studies that have implemented this kind of behavior, and people report that they're able to get to sleep faster because they're in a state of relaxation and calm. So as you do this, you'll build up this habit, your brain starts to make this association, helps you get to sleep faster. Okay. Some environmental issues we talked about before, right? If you sleep on an uncomfortable bed, or you have an uncomfortable bedroom in terms of temperature, in terms of light and noise, then we can do some things to help reduce that. Sorry, I got something in my eye here. Okay. So to the extent that you possibly can, you want to adjust your environment for your physical comfort. So, if you have a bad mattress, that's a pricey thing to replace, but perhaps with pillows, with maybe a mattress topper that's less expensive, you could adjust that physical discomfort for yourself. Maybe you need a new pillow. Maybe you need to adjust blankets, get a fan, or some kind of way to make the room warmer. One of the things that's really helpful if you have high light, maybe you can't block out all of the external light. Eye masks are really, really good at that, and they're very inexpensive. I think noise, though, is probably one of the factors that many of us have to deal with when we're trying to get more and better sleep. And so you can use earplugs if that's comfortable for you and you don't, like me, I take them out somehow during the night and find them halfway across the room the next morning. But my go-to for noise issues is using white noise. And all white noise is just any kind of like constant noise that doesn't catch your attention. It's just in the background. You may even kind of forget it's there. But what that does is it sort of gives you this sound cushion, which prevents intermittent loud noises like the garbage truck backing up, police sirens, these things that are quite noisy, dogs barking. That was my trigger. It helps to prevent those from being noticed by the brain, even while we're asleep. So there are white noise devices. You can buy dedicated devices. You can get apps. You turn to YouTube channels. But my go-to white noise source is my little clock radio right at my bedside. I tune in between stations, so I'm not listening to music. I get that static, and that is enough for me to be able to sleep through my neighbor's dogs barking at 6 a.m. when I am not ready to get up. So explore white noise. There are different frequencies. So you can find like brown noise and pink noise and find something that you like that may help to kind of drown that out. Also helps to drown out snoring if that's an issue that you're dealing with. Okay, our last two items for the sleep hygiene index, and then we'll get to your questions if you've got them. So if you go to bed feeling stressed, angry, upset, or nervous, or you think, plan, or worry when you're in bed, I've got some ideas for you, because these are the things that really keep me from getting good quality sleep. So we know that if you're anxious, or if you're like me, you're a ruminator, you do kind of this repetitive negative thinking. You think about the things that went wrong during the day, or you think about all the things that you didn't get done, or all the things that you have to do, or maybe you had a kind of a negative interaction with a loved one or a coworker, and you just replay these in your mind. That's not conducive. That's not helpful when you're trying to fall asleep, right? We want to be in a state of relaxation and calm, not anxiety and anger. So there are relaxation techniques, and there are quite a few of these that can help you to get more and better sleep. And there's science behind this. So when we do deep breathing or meditation, what we're doing is, if we do that slow, deep breathing, we are actually activating part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system that helps us to rest and digest. That's what it's known for. And it reduces our heart rate, and it reduces our blood pressure, and it helps us to be in a frame of mind that's going to help us to sleep. The other side of the nervous system is the sympathetic side, and that's the fight or flight. You don't want to activate that part and then try to go to sleep, okay? So we're looking for gentle, calming things that are going to help us be in a state of relaxation and receptive to going to sleep. If you like meditations, you can find guided meditations. This is an example of a link that you can try if that's something that resonates with you. There's also a variety of breathing techniques. Follow that link for those. I'll tell you, for me, breathing techniques, and maybe people with like COPD or any kind of issues with breathing and lung issues, you might not find these to be very relaxing at all. I don't. I feel like I am about to pass out or I'm hyperventilating. This does not work for me. But for me, it's just kind of just a regular slow in and out, no problem. So if you have negative reactions to these things, then stop doing them, right? We're all individuals. We all have different triggers and issues with our sleep. So you'll have to kind of try things and see if they work for you. Couple other things that really work for me. When I first started out, I really liked this activity where I'm lying in bed with my eyes closed. I start with the number 1000 and I start doing mental math and I subtract 3 and I go to the next number. So 1000 minus 3 is 997. Subtract 3, 994. And I just kind of go and go and go until I fall asleep. Why does this work? It works because it's focusing my mind on one task, right? It's enough of a mental challenge that I have to think about it, and it doesn't allow me to think about my to-do list or to think about that negative interaction I had with my spouse or all of these things. It just focuses the brain on something that's boring and, just it occupies my mind and allows me to fall asleep. The other thing that I really like, and I've had a lot of positive feedback from this from participants, is this idea of cognitive shuffling. And the name doesn't really matter. And I actually don't know where this came from. I didn't come up with it. If I knew who did, I would have many thanks to give them. But here you go. This is cognitive shuffling. You're going to be lying in your bed with your eyes closed, and you will think of just the first word that pops into your head. So when I was putting the slide together, the first word was desk. Desk starts with the letter D. Your job now is to lie in bed and think of all of the words you can that start with the letter D. And each word that you think of, you're going to form a mental picture in your mind. So again, as I was doing this slide, the first image or the first word that I got was dog. And so I'm lying in bed, I'm going to have a picture of a dog in my head, and then I'm going to think of the next D word. So in this case, I thought of door, picture of door, any kind of door in my head. There are no right answers here, right? Picture that door and then move on to the next word and then the next word and the next word. When you run out of D words, like you can't think of any more words that possibly start with D, go back to the first word you thought of and move to the second letter. So with desk, now we have to think of words that start with E. Then if I finish all my E words, I'll go to S. I rarely finish a word. I'm usually asleep, often just at the first letter. And again, why does this work? It's occupying your mind. It's not allowing you to start to drift and think about other things. You have to do this at a pretty quick pace, though, again, because your mind is going to want to wander, but you go pretty fast. And again, your brain is only able to do this activity and not think about other things. So try that if you have issues with overwhelming thoughts, with anxiety, with just kind of frustration and anything like that. This is a technique that I think you'll find really, really helpful. Okay, one other thing that you can try is this concept or these group of kind of rules or principles that are known as stimulus control therapy. And that name sounds a little scary, not in love with it, but it's really just kind of 5 rules that you can apply that will have been shown to help you get more and better sleep. So stimulus control therapy rules are this: go to bed only when you're sleepy. It makes no sense. If you're not tired, your sleep debt is not high enough, it's going to be really hard to fall asleep, and you're going to toss and turn and look at the clock and get frustrated. You're going to activate that sympathetic nervous system and just make your life just that much harder when it comes to falling asleep. So remember that idea. If you don't fall asleep within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you have permission to get up out of bed and go do something else. You want to do something that's not stimulating, not exciting, preferably under dim light, because exposure to light decreases melatonin production. It's going to keep you alert for a longer period of time. But go find something that you can do that's going to calm you down. And then when you feel sleepy, go and try again, okay? Stimulus control therapy also talks about this idea of consistency, getting up at the same time every morning, no matter when you went to sleep the night before. That's going to help increase your sleep debt that following day. Avoid naps if you're having trouble falling asleep at night or sleeping through the night. And then again, we had this idea before with the sleep hygiene index, really limit that space, limit the bed, the bedroom to sleep and sex, nothing else. Your mind is going to start to associate that place with relaxation and good things rather than stressful things. My best tip out of all of this, if you only take one thing home, is consistent bedtime and wake time, even on the weekends. It's the tip that our Sleep Education for Everyone program participants swear by. All right. They really, really like it. In order for you to test this out, though, you want to give yourself time for it to work. So at least 3 days of consistent bedtime and wake time, 3 days in a row, preferably including the weekends. See what it does for you. Okay. This is my advertisement and my last slide. But if you're interested in learning more, and there's a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to helping you get more and better sleep. But Michigan State University Extension offers our Sleep Education for Everyone program, or SLEEP. We worked really hard on that acronym, so I hope you appreciate it. If you'd like to sign up and find out when classes are available, you can follow this link. If you would like to have sleep delivered maybe to people in your organization, maybe your church, your temple, wherever, you can contact Liz Williams. Her email is here, and she can help set up a class for you. If you work with people who would benefit from getting more and better sleep and would like to be trained to be a sleep facilitator, I would be happy to help you with that. That's all free. None of this costs any money. You don't have to be a resident of Michigan. The sleep classes are available online, although some are in person. So it really is trying to meet you where you are in terms of helping you with improving your sleep. So that's all I have. Hopefully we have a couple minutes for questions if there are any, but thank you so much for your attention and the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you. I wanted to I was so sad because I was like, coffee is how I exist. And you're telling me I can't have a glass of wine before bed or coffee before 5 p.m. or 3. And I'm like, how am I supposed to survive? Right.
Well, so the thing is, those are the recommendations, but we're all individuals, right? And so if you feel like it's part of your nightly routine to have that glass of wine to kind of wind down, and you could experiment. Maybe you go a couple nights and avoid it, see if it makes any difference. If it doesn't, then that's not something that's interfering with your sleep, and I would continue to do it. So you're really trying to find the things that work for you. And one of the things about our program is you get to set the goals that you want to work on that week. So we don't tell you what to do, and it becomes very personalized and individualized for you to get the most out of the program.
I really appreciate that recommendation because I absolutely know that when I have a glass of wine, I have worse sleep, but
I have to say, I don't drink much, but if I do, for whatever reason, I wake up the next day and I feel pretty good. And I'm like, I know I shouldn't, but I do, but it's not an every night kind of thing. And maybe that's the secret or things like that. But again, I'm a fast caffeine metabolizer. I can drink coffee pretty much, till we're getting real close to bedtime. Other people, if you make that mistake and drink caffeinated afternoon, you're going to be up all night. So it just really is an individualized thing.
I do appreciate that. I also can have some caffeine pretty late in the day. There was one question that came up that we didn't get into, and we only have a couple of minutes, but this idea of sleep studies and sleep apnea and what people need to think about, you touched on a little bit, but if we could just say what is a sleep study? When do you think people need to be considering one?
So I think if you have, I feel like the sleep hygiene aspect, improving your behaviors, improving your environment, giving yourself the maximal opportunity to get more and better sleep. If you've done that and you're still struggling, then I think it's time to talk to your primary care provider about other options. Are you a candidate for a sleep study? So sleep apnea is very common. There are certain risk factors. You can get screened for that in the office, but you can even do an online screening yourself if you think that you could take that to the doctor and say, hey, you know what, I didn't score the best on this screener here, and I'm a little worried. What do you recommend? Things like if you snore loudly, maybe your partner or someone else in the house can hear you down the hall. That's an indicator that you might have sleep apnea. If it sounds like you're breathing and then you kind of like hold your breath and then you start, that's a sign of sleep apnea. And again, kind of the hallmark that I think the symptom that most people have is that excessive daytime sleepiness. I'm sleeping 8 hours, but I can't get through the day without being, nodding off and feeling very drowsy. Those are things that I would go and talk to your primary care physician about and see if you would be a good candidate for a sleep study. Anytime your sleep behavior changes, that can be an indicator of a health concern. It could be mental health. Maybe you're depressed, you have anxiety. Could be physical health. Maybe you've got, underlying disease that we haven't quite found yet. So all these things would be great. And then a sleep study can be done in the sleep lab where they hook you up to all of these sensors and they really monitor everything from breathing to muscles to, brain activity. But more and more of these are being done in the home. So they'll send you home with a device, hook you up, tell you how to hook yourself up, and then you can sleep in your own bed. So there are lots of options out there, and we're learning more and more about how to improve sleep every day. So don't give up. You don't have to be a bad sleeper. You just have to kind of keep at it until you figure out what works for you.
Robin, I super appreciate all your expertise. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely be asking for more of your expertise later. I want to say happy Father's Day. Keep your fathers healthy by telling them if they're snoring and making sure they're taking Robin's advice and thinking about whether they need a sleep study. CEUs for community health workers right here. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much.